Today's video will be about putting a shattered skull together. This is our baby raccoon Ember. And as you can see, there is a lot of damage here. Most of her skull is in here. The front pieces and whatnot. So we're going to take this and put her back together for as much of the parts that we have. And I'll show you how to do this. Materials that you will need is, of course, your glue. The glue that I prefer to use is Weld Bond. It is by far the best glue I have seen for doing work with bone. You'll also need an assortment of rubber bands, some Q-tips, scissors, a nice darning needle, although you can use a smaller needle if your bones are smaller and you need something that is small to get into tiny cracks. I'll be showing you how you will be using this needle later. You may also need a pair of forceps. These ones are curved, but you can use straight ones or whatever you have. And I'll be showing you what this would be used for as well. So our first step of putting the skull back together will be to find all of the pieces that go together. It's like a big puzzle piece. And you want to make sure that you got all the pieces in the right spot before you start gluing. Alright, so we know that these are the lower mandibles. These are pretty straightforward. We can set these apart for later. Just set them over there. Okay, now looking at these pieces here, we can see that this is the front of the face. And that should go together like this. So now that we know that this is approximately, these pieces go together, goes up in here. We know that this goes roughly in this area. So we can set these two pieces aside to be glued together. These pieces go together and then they go on to this later. Now the other assorted miscellaneous pieces, these here, well, we know that this is her atlas vertebrae, so this doesn't go on the skull, so we set that aside. All these other little pieces are pieces like this that go up into here. So we can see this goes here. We're starting to form our thing here where we can see. Now this, you can tell by the curve of it that this is a piece that goes underneath the palette. So this would be something that goes underneath this. So to confirm that, we will put this together. There's one of her canines. Put this together here and we can see that there is indeed a piece missing in the middle. So that would be this piece right here. See how that fits? It's almost perfect. So we know that these three pieces and these two little ones that just fell off go together. I'll just set this tooth aside for later. But since I have it here, I might as well show you. This is a canine tooth that has split into two pieces. Now this can be fixed, and I'll show you towards the end of this video how this is fixed. But this is what happens when a skull is left to weather outside and moisture gets into it. That moisture gets into the where the nerve had gone into in the tooth. And it goes down and it splits it when the water freezes. This is why I like to keep skulls out of the weather. There's another little vertebrae. I think that's the axis. And there's some other parts here. Looking at it, this appears to be something underneath the cranium. But we'll just leave all of these little ones until we get these glued. Just put them off to the side. First step, I'm going to examine the part of the cranium here. Now, this is warped from being wet, so it's extremely, it's bent in a way that it shouldn't be. And you can just see right here that this is flexing. She's fractured along there. So one of the first things I'm going to work on is figuring out how to get this back to where it should be. Well, it just broke there, so that makes it easier a little bit. Okay. Just shows you how fragile these bones are. Alright. You can see more fractures on the inside, on the other side too. This was a very young animal. She was probably about 6 months old. I think I've discussed that in other videos with Ember. Okay. This part's actually raised. Okay, now that I know how I'm going to have to hold this, then I can take my glue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a nice generous layer, shaking the glue, on this here. This separation. You can see that it is on both sides of that break. Okay. Once I get her where she's supposed to be, don't worry about the glue bubbles at this point. Finger inside and raise up. Now, to get glue into this separation, put your bottle closely in and squeeze. You'll be getting glue on the inside. You can see right in here that glue is on that inside point. It's the pressure of it squeezing, squeezed it right through. Don't even worry about touching up that glue. That's going to help form your strong bond. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger in and hold this up. And I'm going to hold this for a couple minutes. This is very time-consuming work, but I think it's worth it. See, when you put your finger down, it collapses inwards. I have yet to find a way that keeps it up. Now, if you have really small clamps and a stand, that would probably be ideal for this. Raised a bit. Now, see this glue seam here? I'm just going to touch this up now. Just rub it in and smooth over. And then you don't got to worry about your glue seams. But I'm going to turn the camera off until I have this held up in place. After having held this for a long time and it just not fusing right, I figured out a way to get it to be held together with elastics. I put one elastic around to hold this part into this, and that part held down. So it's a downward and sideways pressure. Now to keep this piece in, the part that was down, to keep that in place, I took a piece of a bamboo skewer, put a notch in it, and run that elastic up through. Now hopefully the pressure will not go and split this fault line here. It seems to be held in place pretty well, but pretty much only time will tell. But where it is on a fault line, if that fault splits, that's a really easy fix, because then that's just a together pressure. So That seems like it's as close as it's going to get. So I'll just let this dry for a bit here and then come back when it's dry for the next step. While the other part was drying, I figured I'd try to get this part together. This is the two sides of the front of the face and the palette part. It took a long time to line this up. I've probably been working at it for half an hour and holding the palette part in the center to this side to get it at a not a fully fused glue fuse, but where the glue was very tacky and holding it together, that if it wasn't in the right spot it could be removed, but it would hold up while I was lining up the other pieces. So now I'm going to hold this together because it's not right for putting elastic on because of the position of the top of it isn't right for that. But you can kind of see here how the skull is coming together now. So we'll hold this together, and then once it's all dry we can start to put the back of the skull and the front of the skull together. Sometimes with the skulls and getting parts in, you have to work through underneath. You can see where the plates match up. I'm just rocking this to get the glue spread. And you can see where those plates line up, and then it can be slid right into place. I'm going to stick a bit of glue down that seam from the inside as well. Come out of place, so I'm just going to wiggle it back down in. This is where that needle comes in handy, is positioning the pieces. There we go. And you can see on the top that it matches pretty good. Now another place where this needle comes in handy, I don't know how well you can see inside the skull, if it's focusing, but we got some glue run right here. You just take your needle and guide it into the other places where you need that glue. It's good to lay the glue into the fault lines. Now, for glue runs, like you see right here, all I've ever done for them is just rub them out. Rubbing straight along the seams doesn't hurt it at all. And if you are worried about your skull being smooth, this glue is sandable. You just use a very fine sandpaper to rub over it after it's finished drying. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of my elastics, put that over there. That is applying extremely light pressure, because that's all we need for this piece. Now I noticed that this piece did lift up. I'm going to see if I can fix that, if the glue is still mandible enough. it is pliable enough that I can stick that down, but I'm going to have to hold it. So I'm going to hold this down and come back when it's all dry.